Hey again everyone, starting this video off unscripted to explain that there are very little visuals except for the markers in between quote-unquote chapters. I was going to draw a bunch of character portraits, but I very quickly got tired of just drawing lions, so I decided that it would be better for the overall experience to just let you guys sit back, close your eyes, and let your imaginations take you where they will. So get yourselves a snack and a drink, get yourselves comfy, and enjoy the end of Karabi's tale. None of what you are about to hear is official, so please don't treat it as such. I am not and never have been part of the team that worked on My Pride. This is my own independent interpretation of what a second season would be if it followed from my vision of the first season. It's been a little while since my first video on this topic. Hope you've all been doing well. Several of you requested a continuation of the My Pride rewrite that I did about a year and a half ago. I'm honored and flattered that so many people have enjoyed and agreed with my reimagination of this story. I'm sorry that it's taken me this long, but I've been working hard on some personal stories. My boyfriend and I finally finished and started a second draft of a collaborative writing project that's been a work in progress for about 4 years, and I started working on my own novel, which I've spent several months researching and world building for, and I'm super excited to one day share my world with people. The second reason it's taken so long is I've been waiting for an announcement from Tribble of Doom regarding a second season. Now that I know where we stand, I feel more comfortable sitting down to put some serious thought into this. I highly recommend that if you haven't seen My Pride or my first video on this series, you get caught up before watching this one. Some things here won't make sense without the full context. For those who don't want to spend a couple of hours doing that, though, here's the short, spoilerful version. Our setting is a world in which a sapient patriarchal lion society worships 3 goddesses who could really use some family counseling. Their unresolved issues are causing all kinds of problems. Dry season is getting harsher, spirits aren't passing on to their afterlife and are wreaking havoc in their distress, and one of the goddesses has seemingly slammed her bedroom door and hasn't come out to talk to her sisters for the past approximately centuries. A lioness is born nameless into this world, like every Pride lioness before her. She loses her brother and father to a rogue male lion just after the intro exposition, is horribly injured after half-blinding their murderer, and has to deal with the struggles of being disabled and having a gay awakening in a culture that openly considers her both useless and unnatural. She meets a prideless lioness who is both charming and into her scars, and opens her eyes to the fact that she doesn't have to live an unhappy Pride life. After she ends up getting chased out of her home for having a cute-as-fuck girlfriend, one of her goddesses directly asks her for help in fixing the world. So that's where our protagonist is at. Play family therapist to the creators of her world, tear down the patriarchy, end all problematic behavior. The easy one first, of course. We open on a panning shot of Quickmane's territory. The land is parched and barren. Heat shimmers on the horizon promise the relief of water that isn't there. Most of the herds have moved on in search of greener pastures. Sun-bleached bones litter the dusty expanse, all that remains of those who succumbed to the drought. Power Strike surveys what water is left in their oasis, little more than a muddy puddle now. She sniffs at a dead fish and wrinkles her nose. Without a word, she turns, revealing that she's looking skinnier than when we last saw her. She picks her way around the other lionesses, who are all lying in what shade the sister step provides, conserving their energy. Water Hunter is curled around Feather, who is growing in the first few tufts of a mane. Her young daughters are nowhere to be seen. The Pride has no other young cubs, as pickings are too slim to sustain any pregnancies. Power Strike stops briefly to lick Farleap and Silent Stalk's heads. They barely react to her, beyond ear twitches and tail flicks. With grim determination, Power Strike approaches the spot Quickmane has claimed. It is, naturally, the shadiest spot, tucked away beneath a rocky overhang. She pauses, aiming a narrow-eyed glare at his turned back. "Permission to speak freely, my mane?" she asks. He grunts in acknowledgement. The sister steppe has always been an abundant hunting ground, she begins carefully. Its waters have never run dry in my memory, nor did they ever do so in Sharptongue's time, or her mother's before her. And yet, we now face that very problem. "Are you going to get to your point before I die of old age?" Quickmane grumbles. She snarls at him, irritated with his attitude. "The point is that we have already lost 2 of Water Hunter's cubs because she couldn't make enough milk for all 3. Feather, our daughters, the rest of us will all follow them if we don't relocate. That finally gets Quickmane to lift his head and growl at Power Strike. Relocate to where exactly? There's nowhere from here to the horizon that will be any different. It's the dry season. We can't know that staying put is our best option unless we go searching, Power Strike snaps back. There may be a deeper oasis somewhere that hasn't dried out yet. Even if we found one that hadn't been claimed by another pride, it would be infested with crocodiles, Quickmane points out. We stay put and wait for the rains, like every other dry season before this one. That's final. He turns away and lays back down, a clear dismissal. Power Strike growls, frustrated. She starts to leave, but she pauses, looks over her shoulder, and wrinkles her muzzle with disdain. When you took over our pride, you said you killed Starmane honorably, she says, bitterness in every word. If you've a shred of the integrity that you claim, you'll at least consider the life of your son worth saving. When she rejoins the other lionesses, Farleap stirs. It didn't go well? It never does, Power Strike answers, sitting beside her. The Hunt Sheep shakes her head, disgusted. Things can't go on this way. The rains will come soon, Mother, Farleap offers, dragging herself upright. We just need to wait a little longer. Power Strike silently takes in her daughter's thin frame, looks over the other similarly hungry lionesses, and her gaze settles on Feather. She closes her eyes, takes a deep breath, and when she opens them again, there is fire in her gaze. No, she says. We're not going to sit and welcome our deaths. Rouse the others. Cut to black. Fade in on a deep, verdant jungle. The canopy is alive with birdsong, and frogs and insects chirp in the undergrowth. Far in the distance, a baboon shrieks. We follow the path of a gently babbling brook, and something becomes eerily apparent. Though we can hear many animals, there are none to be seen. Something is very off here, but we don't know what or why just yet. Focus on a clearing that the stream passes by. The undergrowth at the edge of it rustles, and Hover's head pokes out. Her ears twitch as she scans her surroundings warily, sniffs a few times, then calls an all clear and steps out of the bushes. Fire follows her. For a moment, Karabi doesn't appear. Then she stumbles through, branches and creeping vines snagging on her injured leg and nearly tripping her. Hover turns back to check on her, and the two affectionately bump heads. All good, gorgeous? Hover asks softly. I'm fine, Karabi answers. She's badly out of breath from struggling her way through the foliage, though I am starting to gain a greater appreciation for open ground. Hover licks at a few of Karabi's scratches. I'm sorry. We should have looked for an easier way through. Don't worry about it. Karabi gives Hover a nuzzle. I'm not sure there's such a thing as an easier way through wherever we are, she says, glancing around. She hobbles over to the stream for a drink. Why don't we rest a bit, Fire suggests. This seems as safe a place as any, and we've come a long way. At least, I think we have. He looks around, uncertain. We get a slow pan around them, emphasizing that the shifting place is all green all the time. Everything looks nearly identical, and a thick mist blocks any view of the sun or stars, making navigating very difficult. Hover hums, uneasy. She looks to Karabi and says, You two can rest here for a bit if you want. I'll scout around and see if I can't find some higher ground. We need to get above this fog so we know where we are. Karabi looks up from where she's crouched at the water's edge. I don't like the idea of splitting up, she protests. We should stick together until we find Azra. How will we ever find her if we don't get oriented? Hover points out. We could end up wandering around in circles for days. I'll be right back, she adds, trying to be reassuring. Karabi hesitates, then takes a deep breath and nods. Be careful. I won't let the stream leave my sight, Hover promises. She steals another quick nuzzle and bounds away, disappearing into the undergrowth, following the stream towards its source. Karabi and Fire settle themselves and sit in companionable silence for a moment. Then he breaks it with a quiet, So, you and her. Karabi smiles a little, fond and shy. Yeah. Hard to believe, isn't it? I wouldn't say that, Fire says quickly, with an uncomfortable glance at Karabi's scars. It's a little unexpected. Not that I mean I didn't expect that He fumbles, trying to find better words to convey what he's thinking. She treats you okay. he finally asks a little helplessly. She's great, Karabi says warmly. I don't know what it is about her, but... She gazes in the direction that Hover went. Even on bad days, she makes me look forward to tomorrow. Fire chuckles a little. It sounds to me like you're happy. Karabi thinks about that. I am, she says wonderingly, as if only just realizing it. We cut to Hover, purposefully bounding through the undergrowth as she finishes, Even with everything Kansu told me, everything that's at stake, I really am. Hover runs onward beside the path of the stream, but it's clear she's getting frustrated. The ground is still stubbornly level, with no hills or even openings in the undergrowth in sight, and the mist seems to be getting thicker as night approaches. She glances toward the sky, but the mist still blocks her view of that too. She growls under her breath, slowing to a halt. This is no good, she grumbles. Shifting place, should have called it green hell. The mist drawing closer still. The fur along Hover's spine rises uneasily. She turns back, and comes face to face with Azra. She stands the same height as Hover, and there is no otherworldly shimmer to her creamy white fur, but the authority she carries herself with makes it obvious that this is a lioness who has never bowed to anyone, and is not about to start now. It's clear that she's been following Hover for some time.
Its paths are only hidden to those who walk with closed eyes,
the goddess says. Her voice is gentle, ethereal and unthreatening, but there's a certain air of confidence about it that speaks to the power that lies behind her mortal visage. Her blind but keenly intelligent eyes stare through Hover knowingly, as though there are no secrets between them. Oh good, Hover says sarcastically after she recovers her composure. More riddle speak, my favorite. Ezra flicks an ear.
One would expect more respect from those who stand in a god's presence.
Yeah? Well, you're not my god, Hover retorts. And we just spent what I think is a day traipsing around your jungle looking for you, when you apparently could have done this, she gestures to the whole of Azra with a paw, at any time, so forgive me if I'm not feeling very respected myself. Azra looks down her nose at Hover for a long moment, and it seems Hover has badly overstepped. Hover flattens her ears but stands her ground, bracing for whatever comes after. Then Azra smiles, a little fond, a little sad.
I remember the strength of your soul well, little spark. It is good to see that time hasn't diminished it.
Hover stands straighter, surprised. You know me?
By other names, in lives long past,
Azra says. The fleeting warmth leaves her expression.
I know what Kansu seeks, why you and Kyoga's vessel have been sent.
Well, good. That saves us some explaining, Hover says. Come with me and we'll talk to Karabi. She pointedly stresses Karabi's newly chosen name. Once we get all this sorted out, then we'll leave your home. Everybody wins. For the first time, Azra looks away.
Karabi must be the one to break the cycle and end the curse.
Hover blinks, then frowns. Yeah, that's why we've come. Let's go do that.
You misunderstand, but you cannot be blamed. Kansu has always underestimated our sister's capacity for cruelty.
Azra sighs, and it carries the weight of eons. Pain touches her words.
She believes I'm hiding from Suns's anger. The truth of it is that Suns locked me away, for however long it takes for the curse I laid upon her chosen to break, while your mate, Karabi, still walks her predetermined path. I'm kept prisoner here,
Azra reveals.
The thread of fate has not yet been severed. Until it is, I cannot leave, and I cannot speak to my own chosen.
Hover stands stunned, putting the pieces together. It's not Azra they must convince to let the curse end, but Suns herself. Suns, whose implacable temper and ability to hold a grudge has kept her own sister imprisoned for generations beyond counting, who has left lost souls to wander, confused and frightened, without the guidance of her sister. Wait, but then how do we fix any of this?
I have been trying to figure that out since it began, and I believe I may finally have a solution,
Azra says. The mists part, and a startlingly pale male lion appears. He comes to stand on Azra's shoulder, silent and staring with unnerving intensity.
This is Ghost. I haven't been able to send him out on his own. I believe Suns recognizes him as a piece of my soul, but your presence may confuse things enough for him to leave with you. If it works, he will be my voice, my eyes. a guiding light for the lost while Karabi rights the wrongs of the past.
How? Hover presses.
She must confront the one who began all of this, and she must show the mercy that I chose her for so long ago.
Cut back to Karabi and Fire, who are starting to look anxious. The bushes upstream rustle, and out step Hover and Ghost. Karabi jumps up and rushes to greet Hover, glad that she's safe. Fire hangs back, looking at the newcomer warily. "So, who's this?" he asks.
"Hello. We are called Ghost."
Ghost chirps back. "Yeah, so," Hover starts, glancing from their newest companion to the others. "This is complicated. He's coming with us." "Why?" Karabi asks. "What happened out there?" "I'll explain on our way out of here. Short version, your goddesses have some serious communication issues," Hover says grimly. "And that's not even the bad news." Apprehensive, Karabi ventures, "Then what is the bad news?" Hover sighs heavily. "I think we have to go back to the Sisters' Step." End of first episode. Having spoken to Azra and made their way out of the shifting place, now that they're accompanied by Ghost, it's time for the protagonists to figure out which way is home and walk all the way back. Along the way, they meet various restless spirits. Ghost manages to soothe most of them and convince them to reside within him until the gods have resolved their issues and Azra returns to her duties. This doesn't always work, though, and they are attacked by some of the more vengeful dead. Fire nearly gets his face bitten off and is rescued by a passing male lion who introduces himself as Tangle. It turns out that Tangle is pretty handy at treating scrapes and scratches. He explains that he comes from a greener land, and that his mother ensured that he would know how to take care of himself before he was exiled from his pride. Fire and Tangle quickly find that they get along like a house on fire, and grow closer over the course of the next few weeks of travel. Their party of 4 gets upgraded to a party of 5. Hover worriedly notes that the prideless stretch is drier than usual, and that she's brought them to several places that, as far as she can remember, have always had water. Karabi wonders if that means Suns has noticed that Azra has gotten around her imprisonment and how much time they have to finish things. They pick up the pace as much as they can, with some shenanigans, arguments, and team bonding along the way. The biggest argument involves Hover calling Fire out for his stumbling around how to address Karabi's injured leg. Fire argues that because now there are 4 able-bodied hunters around, Karabi doesn't need to risk further harm, and she can let them take care of her. Hover and Karabi reassert that Karabi is perfectly capable of helping with the hunting in her own way, and she doesn't need looking after. It culminates in Karabi and Fire having a heart-to-heart about how he regrets being such a jerk to her and Spark when they were cubs, and he doesn't know if he could live with himself if he let Karabi get hurt. She forgives Fire and gently tells him that against the odds, she's survived and Hover has been willing to teach her to work around her setbacks. She says that she's accepted that while she can't change what happened, she can do more with her life than let others tell her what she can't be. Fire apologizes, and they share a nuzzle. This is later followed up by an even cuter heart-to-heart between Fire and Tangle. Tangle can see that Fire still feels guilty about the way he's acted toward his sister, and comes to sit with him in silent companionship. After some small talk about the stars and their situation, Tangle shares a story about how his mother lost an eye to a wildebeest's horn. He says that he thinks she found it easier to adapt to than the rest of his family did, and that she'd once told him she wished they'd fuss less. He concludes that he understands that Fire is struggling, and that he knows Fire means well, but that Karabi knows what she's capable of. He adds that he's there to listen if Fire ever needs to talk. The 2 males lean against each other, and from then on, Fire lets Karabi decide what she can and can't handle. All in all, it takes them a few weeks to get back to the border of Quickmean's territory, and when they do, they quickly realize that something is wrong. The scent markers are stale, the grass is dead and withered, the sun beats down relentlessly. The watering hole that Karabi and Fire remembered lies empty, not even mud remains. Ghost wanders off, as he is prone to doing, and collects the tiny souls of the cubs that didn't survive Dry Season's wrath. He also briefly speaks with Sharptongue, thanking her for her unending faith in her granddaughter. The search around the steppe is brief, the only conclusion obvious. No one appears to greet or challenge our band of misfits, and it's clear that nothing has lived here for some time. Where would they have gone, Karabi wonders. The answer comes from Spark's spirit, speaking through Ghost.
"They followed the dry riverbed south,"
he says.
"and Quickmean followed them."
Hover and Karabi exchange a heavy glance. How long had passed since then? Was there a hope of finding Karabi's family? Then that's what we'll do too, Karabi decides. If anyone could lead the Pride to another watering hole, it's my mother. Cut to Power Strike surveying the dry, dusty expanse ahead of her. There are scars on her muzzle that weren't there the last time we saw her. Clouds loom tantalizingly near, but the likelihood that they will produce rain is slim to none. She turns to the group following her. They all look lean and exhausted, but determined. Somehow, maybe through the sheer force of will, Power Strike has found enough food and water to keep the whole of the small Pride going. The stress of the last few months tells. Power Strike's muzzle is now tinged gray. She squints at something moving on the horizon, then relaxes when she recognizes Feather. Lanky-limbed and scarred by battle, he runs alongside the riverbed until he reaches Power Strike, and he brings good news. The mud a few miles upriver is still damp. Within another day, perhaps two, they will find more drinkable water, and enough prey to feed them for a time. Power Strike looks back the way they came. The wind carries the barest hint of a familiar scent. Within a few days, Quickmane will catch up to them. Power Strike urges the Pride on. Quickmane has such a head start that it will be impossible for Karabi, Hover, Fire, Tangle, and Ghost to catch up before he finds the Pride. It's now a race just to get there before anyone dies, and our merry band are at a huge disadvantage. Karabi can move pretty well in 3 legs, but the others could move faster without her, and she knows it. Desperately, she prays to Kansu to give them enough time to do what the goddess asked. Her pleas are answered. Thunder rolls overhead as a massive storm begins to brew. The heat builds and thickens into a swampy mugginess as the goddesses challenge each other, jockeying for dominion over the sky. Lightning rips furiously through the clouds, and there's an answering, more deafening roar of thunder. The storm gives everyone pause, and as she looks around, Power Strike spots Quickmane on the horizon behind the Pride. She glances at the darkening sky, squares her shoulders, and turns to face him. One way or another, she will see this ended today. Farleap, Silentstalk, and Feather come to her side, each bearing the marks of the last time the Pride challenged Quickmane. They fought him and won once. They can do so again. Individually, Quickmane outweighs all of them, even Power Strike. But even starving, the Lionesses have the advantage of numbers on their side, and their desperation tells. They harass the larger male while Power Strike gives us a demonstration of how she earned her name and downs him with a ferocious blow to his blind side. It's not enough to keep him down, though, and he lunges, aiming a lethal bite at her. Lightning tears through the clouds again. A shadow streaks across the battlefield. Feather is half his father's size, but he's more nimble, and he uses it to his advantage to keep Quickmane on the defensive. His half-sisters flank their father, Silentstalk and Farleap backing Quickmane up against the dry riverbed. A roar cuts across the noise of the fighting. Stop! Our merry band has arrived, run ragged and completely out of breath. But even exhausted, Karabi walks to the front of the group and says again, "Stop. Don't kill him." Every eye is trained on her, most in shock. Power Strike is the first to approach, slowly and then bounding to meet the daughter she's believed dead for months. They nuzzle joyfully, reunited, while Quickmane's expression turns murderous behind them. He tries to take a step forward, but Farleap and Silentstalk snarl and block his path. Karabi's words catch up to Power Strike. "Don't kill him. Daughter, he tried to kill you," she says, incredulous. "He tried to kill us all. He murdered your father." "He's done a lot more than that," Karabi says, drawing puzzled looks from her former Pride. "Trust me, I know that I have more reason than most to want him dead." She looks at Quickmane coolly as he snarls at her. "But the cycle has to break somewhere," she adds softly. "I won't be part of it anymore." Hover and Fire look around, wondering if that's all it takes. But the storm rages overhead and Azra does not appear. Hover starts to doubt herself, wondering if she'd guessed wrong, and Light doesn't inhabit Quickmane after all. Ghost offers no answers, his gaze locked on the sky. "How noble," Quickmane spits, and he leaps at Karabi. Hover intercepts, tackling him. Karabi watches in horror as they fight viciously, reminded of the way that Kyoga lost her beloved all those generations ago. But this time it's Hover who has the advantage of surprise, and she fights with the ferocity of a dozen lionesses to keep Quickmane from killing her mate. He lands a few glancing blows, but Hover is quick and clever, and it's clear this will go on until he tires or Hover misjudges. Karabi steels herself, then leaps into the fray from Quickmane's blind side. She knocks him to the ground and locks her teeth around his throat. Not hard enough to kill, but enough to make it clear that if he forces her, she will end this. He freezes. Pan to everyone watching, holding their breath, to see what Karabi will do. Even the storm seems to still for a long moment. She thinks of her father, her brother, every insult that Quickmane has ever hurled at her, the way he tried to exile her to a slow death on the stretch. She thinks of how Light has the blood of countless lions and lionesses on his paws, how the original Karabi's last breath rattled out of her. She thinks of how easy it would be to just bite down a little harder and be rid of Quickmane and Light for the rest of this lifetime. She lets go of him and steps away. Quickmane looks up at her, bewildered. "Enough," Karabi says tiredly. The sky rings with a deafening clap of thunder. There's a brilliant flash of light and Karabi's eyes glow a brilliant gold. Azra's faint outline stands behind her. Her voice echoes with the goddess's authority.
It's past time for this to end. Go, and live what's left of your life far away from my family. Trouble this pride no more, or face worse than you have already endured. Thus is the breaking of my curse. Thus you receive your only warning, bearer of the betrayer's soul.
Thoroughly terrified, Quickmane scrambles to his feet and flees. There's a pause while everyone processes what's just happened. Then the pride-born lions and lionesses all kneel to the avatar of their goddess.
Peace,
Azra says gently through Karabi.
and rise.
That's it then, Hover asks, looking around. Tangle snaps out of his awe and hurries to tend to her injuries as best he can. Fire hovers at his shoulder, glancing around like he expects Quickmane will come back as soon as they lower their guard. Azra smiles, a little amused, a little relieved, and very weary. Karabi's gaze turns to the dark sky, and she frowns.
I must still face my sisters. Suns has much to answer for. But yes, your part in this is done. Farewell, and thank you all.
The goddess's presence fades, and without preamble or farewell, Ghost turns and begins to leave. He looks back over his shoulder when Karabi calls after him, but vanishes into the dry grasses without a word. He leaves not a trace of himself behind. Powerstrike and the rest of the Pride are understandably bewildered by what's just happened in front of them. They surround Karabi, clamoring for explanations of what just happened, how she survived, who her new friends are, and how she found fire. Feather bounces around, detailing how cool he thinks Karabi is. Karabi smiles at her family, sits down, and begins, "Well, it all started 1,000 years ago, when the world was a very different place." Slow zoom out as she tells them the whole story. Pan up to the stormy clouds overhead, and we see the first raindrops fall as the long dry season breaks. Karabi narrates that after Azra reappeared, a storm unlike any she'd ever seen finally broke and soaked the thirsty savannah. It's been years since they last saw any sign of Quick, no longer a main. While she isn't sure he won't cause trouble in the future, or that the goddesses have fully forgiven one another, Suns has at long last turned her glare from the mortal realm. The rains come regularly now, and the restless dead no longer haunt vast, empty stretches of savannah. Cut to Powerstrike overlooking the sister step, old and grizzled, but still proudly serving as hunt chief, with Feather as her second in command. The steppe has become known as a place where the lost and the wanderers may stay in peace for as long as they like. Its waterhole has never once run dry since what's come to be called the Great Drought, and it will never again know the rule of a tyrant. Fire and Tangle have settled in the place where Fire was born and taken to naming themselves the honorary uncles of cubs who were orphaned young. Ghost disappeared without a trace not long after Azra's curse was lifted. There are occasional rumors of a pale traveler leaping in to help someone in need, and Karabi thinks that he left because Azra needed help to collect the remaining lost souls. And how is Karabi herself doing? We see her and Hover frolicking in a beautiful field full of wildflowers. Karabi tackles Hover and they wrestle, as Karabi says that the two of them left the sister's step to roam the world, to spread the truth about Pride Law and see what it had hidden in its farthest corners. She concludes that she doesn't know what comes next, but that, so long as I'm with my Pride, I know that it'll be an adventure. And here we are at the end of a journey, a year and a half in the making. Now obviously I'm taking a lot of liberties and making a lot of assumptions about the trajectory of the series. I'm not, and never have been, on the My Pride team, as I said at the start of this video, and the odds of that ever happening are non-existent. I have tremendous respect for the amount of work that these wonderfully talented people put into the first season of their show, and I'm not out to step on any toes. But for those who have been left wanting more in the face of the hiatus, or wanted a conclusion to my version of the story, I hope this does the whole thing justice in your mind. Couple of quick points. I've said in the past that I think Fire or Feather might be Light's canon reincarnation, and I stand by that. But as I was writing out this hypothetical, definitely not canon continuation, I realized I really prefer the image of Nothing/Karabi dethroning her biggest adversary and primary abuser. Thematically, it just made a lot of sense since I hadn't killed him off. I hope it was as satisfying to hear as it was to write. I also hope it was satisfying for people to see some big characters get reintroduced. When I cut them from the rewrite of the first season, it was always my intent to bring some underutilized characters back and give them bigger roles. To those who were hoping Feather would be one of them, I'm sorry. In the original canon, the purpose he serves undermines Nothing's role in the story. I do think that he serves a great supporting role in Power Strike's half of the story, though. All in all, whether or not you agree that My Pride is flawed, or you agree with the way I think a second season would play out or not, I hope you've enjoyed coming on this journey with me. I thought it was a good writing exercise and a teachable moment. Disabled characters don't have to be written as constantly beaten down and struggling. People like me and the many, many others who live with these conditions every day aren't always miserable, and we can choose to surround ourselves with people who lift us up instead of putting us down. We can adapt and overcome. We can find happiness with the ones we love. We might be more vulnerable to the people who would prey on us, abuse us, and take advantage of our situations, but that makes it even more important to show disabled characters with healthy attachments and relationships. Toxicity is romanticized and perpetuated to a disturbing degree. Abusive partnerships are rationalized and accepted because they're often the only LGBT+ representation we get. Able-bodied, neurotypical characters give disabled characters "you matter" speeches, like we don't know that we've always mattered. Like we need someone to validate something so basic, so intrinsic to being alive. We can do better than that. We are the writers of the future. Stand up, put your fingers to the keyboards, and tell your stories. Write self-indulgent, fluffy fanfiction. Be the change you want to see. And be kind to the people around you, because you never know what they might be going through. Stay safe out there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Until next time, as always, stay hydrated, remember to take your meds, eat if you've forgotten to, and take care.